Alright, I'm just going to move on with this other All That Glitters review. This is for Arar, I think? Yes, Arar, who has started, where I usually start in this light blue. So I'm going to just give this brief scan. We have a relatively solid build, maybe a little bit more walking than necessary. We have maybe some scouts went forward, did a little bit of damage. Commander goes forward. Instructors go forward. Holding units. We also have had a review from a non-mentor, which is always appreciated. I'm just having a look at this to just double check that review, see if I've got anything to add from experience. Alright. We had building laser towers rather than repairing. Got very low on energy. Holding there, and then the Guardian comes through. Got much better scaling. Alright. I do like the T2 Con and the upgraded mexes with that. Okay. Also note that he's building Stout with these missile trucks, but I don't see the Stout doing a whole lot of damage. I don't see any particular effort to make Reclaim up here, which is really important. We have a lot of energy storages. By continuing to build these Tech 1 units also, while we're upgrading these metal extractors. And we're also not scaling our energy. Okay, I have an idea of the big things I'd like to talk about this game. So let's just rerun it from the top. Hello, welcome to the chat, Poohman. Thank you for the follow, Poohman and Chronographer. How are you guys going? I'm also on voice chat in Discord if you'd like to join and either like chat about anything that, if you've got any questions to ask, that would be awesome.
Battle started.
Alright. This opening build is alright, with the kind of resources that you're seeing. But we are seeing these scouts come out really early. And so what I'd want to encourage you to do is before any of these scouts come out, you're going to have... Let's see, for example, what Red does across from you. He puts out 2 constructors immediately, and now you've built maybe a slightly slower factory, but your scouts are about as far across the map as anyone's scouts are in this moment. which means that you have had time to put out a constructor before anyone has a chance to raid you, and you need those scouts. And that's really important because the earlier you get these metal extractors, the more resources you get from them. Because they're just gonna keep on producing that metal indefinitely. It's not like a rock reclaim where you just reclaim it once and then you're always getting the same value from it. The earlier you build your metal extractors, the more metal they're producing, and so the longer they're producing metal because they start earlier, and so the more metal you get from them. So it's really important in these kind of map situations that you get out that constructor really early, and you start it building towards the front line. Probably for this position, I'd probably get a constructor running out there, one constructor running out there like your commander, and one on that kind of an angle. So that's the first thing. Hey Estone, welcome to the chat.
Hi.
Hello. Feel free to comment or ask questions or anything. Alright, so back to this. With moving the commander away from the factory this early, that is alright, and also note that these scouts, even though they're doing damage here, Better Do Better actually has the scouts that he could have stopped this raid. And that's important to consider when you're doing raids like this. It can be valuable to do it, but at the same time, it's generally not worth sacrificing your ability to build your metal extractors for these scouts. Because even if you destroy these metal extractor, you can't counter the fact that you have no way of stopping the fact that this constructor has moved across to this metal extractor already, and you've only got the one constructor, and it takes a really long time to build a constructor actually, compared to these other units that you might build around the same price. So is being able to build a constructor and send it out while you've built these scouts. So even if you do destroy that metal extractor and rob those bit of resources from him, he still has a market advantage over you out of that entire trade. If you go on to destroy it, and I do believe you get a scout through the back here that destroys more, that can be valuable, but keep that in mind when you're just deciding whether it's valuable to do those raids or not. Chronographer, it's always welcome to submit a replay. You can submit an older one or whichever, or you can play, or you can just ask questions about anything you've seen in your time watching. Alrighty. So I would generally recommend you build at least a second constructor before your commander leaves your factory. You can get away with just the one, but it's difficult. The other thing I would recommend is that you not build Blitz in this kind of a situation. At least this early. There are no enemy pawns. I guess there are a couple pawns coming across from blue over there, but you have your commander and a laser tower and the ability to build a radar and spot any of those slower moving units coming through. So you're generally going to find more value using scouts to defend yourself than you are going to find using Blitz, especially because the Blitz is slower and they have a really small range, which is really hard for them to cover an area. Radar is your best bet for defending against the scouts. Right, well, scouts and radar are your best bet about defending against the scouts, especially because the Blitz can only have the function of fighting scouts, while your scouts, if you have them, then they can also go and raid potentially, and when you get into a frontline situation, they can scout the front line and provide you information. So the scouts have a lot more longevity of value. And so rather than walking this comm immediately, what I would probably do is I would bring this constructor. This constructor would come build these metal extractors. I would build another constructor and then I would build another constructor and have that assist the factory. And then I would use my commander to build a few more wind generators and move out. Wind is high at the moment, so you have enough, but as this constructor builds metal extractors, you're going to need more. As you add on a couple more metal extractors, then you can add on one or two more constructors, and then those constructors, one of them can build this line of metal extractors, and the other one can add on wind generators, and you can make sure you build a construction turret before you go and build those wind generators. And that's part of the value also of building extra wind generators with your commander before you leave. And so that's very similar to what Better Do Better does. He walks his first constructor out, then his commander stays back, builds a few more wind generators, and he builds another constructor to stay here. Another two constructors, they build a construction turret, and then wind generators, and then his commander works out. So it's very similar to what your opponent is doing that I'm recommending. Now what I would do as Better Do Better, and for you, I'd recommend don't cross over here to build this metal extractor, because that metal extractor is going to be built by the constructor that comes this way. This metal extractor over here can be built by the constructor that comes this way and builds that line. This constructor can take that line, and then a third constructor can take that line. And what that means, generally speaking, is that you might walk a little bit faster, but overall, you're saving the amount of walking you're doing. Because you're not walking back and forth this way, you're just walking down towards the front line. And that can allow you to build significantly faster, especially if one of your constructors is delayed. Then it doesn't have to walk as far before it can start building you additional metal extractors. Now, one of the big things about this unit, I like that you've gone for stouts, but stouts have a high difficulty combating commanders. They're alright against laser towers and other units. You're going to find a lot more value generally from Janus. They trade off a little bit of speed, a significant amount of speed and a bit of cost for slightly better damage and tracking missiles. Because they track, they do more consistent damage, and you can spend less time in range because it's high burst, so you go briefly into range and then you immediately go back out. While stouts, you have to stay in range, which increases the chances that you'll be degunned, gives the enemy a lot more of a chance to sit there firing at you, and it's all around bad time. Let's just ban that. Alright. And then and so generally speaking, I'd advise you go more directly into missile trucks or Janus than going into stouts in a front line like this. Another thing to note is these laser towers that you're building up here. Laser towers have the effect of, in this case, they do close down raids and make it so that you don't have to keep these splits around covering the front. but they slow down your missile trucks, which can be used to actually move forward and damage the enemy. And so each of these laser towers is a little bit less that the enemy has to defend himself. And so between all this investment you've invested on the front, that's 1000 metal that you've invested on the front that doesn't really have the ability to move forward and damage him. The Blitz and the Stouts are going to get degunned by his commander, and the laser towers just can't move. So I'd advise you spend earlier investment into your missile trucks or your Janus, which can deal with the commander and better with the laser towers, and then they can more consistently, more earlier deal damage. Now what I'd be doing with your commander, we don't currently have radar. I'd add radar, and then I'd see the kind of units that you're facing. I'd probably dot maybe a couple laser towers across that, and that's it. That's all you need. He can't gain much by pushing his commander into you, and he can stand to lose a lot of health, so he's probably not going to do that. And you're overall in a generally solid state. The other thing to acknowledge is that you're a little bit below halfway of the map. The halfway point on this map is somewhere between these mexes, like somewhere about there. And so, because you've stood back and built these laser towers, you've actually ceded an entire row of metal extractors to the enemy. Where you had, in the time that you've been building these laser towers over here, you did have time that you can move further up and secure more territory. And especially with, again, Janus, units that can fight the commander, you can, if you're going to go with Blitz, you can use the Blitz to cover this side. And then you can more aggressively position with the commander. To be honest, I'm a little bit unsure about whether to build the Blitz. It's useful to have them to cover the ground. It's probably slightly more desirable to bring your commander up in a line where you can drop a laser tower over here to prevent raids over here, and then you can move more directly towards where the commander is, and it's useful to scout out where his commander's coming down so that you can do that, because you want your commander to end up where his commander is, but if you come up on a line over here, you can establish the laser tower over there. And cover this side, and then your commander positioned over this side helps cover this side too. And then mostly you're going to end up using scouts, and then you can also use your Janus and mobile units to pivot across the space and cover it against raids. So this missile truck's coming up. There is maybe some utility to hanging him back and having him not fire, but the earlier he's up here, the more time he steals from the commander and stops him from either starts killing the units up here, or if the commander stops and starts repairing him, stops him from establishing further defenses. So this unit could be valuable already, and you could be achieving that value. Similar, you could be achieving a radar up here, and it could see the gaps up here, and there was a time where Gluten didn't have any units in here. Your Blitz could have come here, killed that max, and just come back out. Small stuff like that. A lot of these players in the rooms you're going to be playing with in around your rating are going to leave a lot of those gaps, and with just a little bit of radar you can spot them and exploit them. Don't overcommit, don't keep driving in, because then you'll lose your Blitz, and then you won't be able to defend yourself, and then they can attack you. But it's better you just go and get something for free, and then just come back out for cheap. Now, something to consider here. If you're low on energy, don't build this energy storage. Generally on this map, because wind can go so low, rather than building an energy storage, I generally even just build a mix of solar collector and wind generators. But if you are energy stalling, do make sure you're building additional energy production. Something that's also useful on a map like this where the wind is low and you might want to be building solar collectors, you can build additional vehicle constructors rather than construction turrets. Vehicle constructors produce just a little bit of energy, which makes them not as expensive as they seem. You build 2 constructors that produces the same metal as a solar collector, or about the same as 2 wind generators, and so the overall cost for your construction vehicles is probably going to be slightly less than the cost of the construction turret at the average wind speed, and that's going to give you a little bit more reliable income. That also means when your constructor's building, it's helping out a bit more, so that's what I generally advise on this sort of a map with a low minimum wind speed and a relatively low average wind speed. And that difference just there and that little bit of extra energy could be the difference between having, well, firstly, you've got metal extractors that aren't producing metal, but making sure you establish that extra energy, and you want to build the energy storage when you have excess energy, not when you have none. So good rule of thumb is when you don't have enough energy, if energy goes down, build wind generators. I'd probably even say build wind generators, not solar collectors, unless you have absolutely 0 energy, because wind generators don't cost a lot of energy to build them. And so even on this, how many metal extractors do you have? You have 10 metal extractors, which can produce you about 18 metal per second. 18 metal per second times 4 is about 80. You have just less than enough energy to just build wind generators non-stop. If wind generation went down to 0, then you might be in a bit more trouble, might need to build solar collectors. But still, what I'd say is just keep building the wind generators until you have enough. What I'd say is enough wind generators for your economy. At this point, currently you had 10 of these metal extractors and you're building missile trucks, which cost a little extra energy. You're probably going to want 3 wind generators per metal extractor as a target, and you have another one somewhere? Maybe that one there. 3 wind generators per metal extractor. About this time, you'd be wanting about 30 wind generators, which you really don't have, and it's evident that most players don't have it. And so it would be worth, to a certain extent, rather than even building some of these metal extractors, because like you're expanding with your commander, you can grab a constructor that's building metal extractors and just get it building wind generators instead. Or in this sort of a situation, it might be more valuable to get your construction turret and just have it assist the wind generators, or another thing, just because your commander kind of got to the front and it didn't have a lot to do when it was at the front because it's already built the metal extractors and it just built all these laser towers. If instead of, let's say, you only needed like 2 of these laser towers, I would say enemy only has 3. That's a significant amount of time you could have spent building wind generators at your base instead. And that's what I'd suggest you do. It's really rough when the wind gets low like this. But you really did, even at the average, you don't have enough wind generation. You need about 300 energy per second right now. And it's at max. Now these Whistlers sitting back like that, that's sort of reasonable considering that he outnumbers you, but the big problem with that is that even if you sit back so that your Whistlers aren't taking damage, something else is taking damage. Bring your commander up, get it repairing those Whistlers, and just keep firing. Just keep it firing. And that's part of the reason you might not want to build these additional laser towers. They are very vulnerable to those artillery, and if they build artillery, you're in a bad place. Now, I imagine if you had made a bunch of these changes, built those Whistlers earlier, you might have outnumbered him in Whistlers, been able to deal damage earlier, and take him down, and prevent him even from building this gauntlet. For example, if you had a few Whistlers earlier, could have taken down the laser towers, and then your commander could walk right up to that. Who knows? Because he could have also played better too. So if things are different, they would have been different. But what I would say is, if you're in a 1v2 situation like this, this is a great call. Say, I'm in a 1v2. I'd probably add that by grabbing someone and saying, like over here, it's like, hey, please come help, I'm 1v2. Something like that. Just drop that, let him decide whether he wants to come help. Maybe you can remind him later in a few minutes if he still hasn't come help. But other than that, what is a very wise thing to do when you're in a 1v2, rather than standing here and fighting, because if you stand here and fight, that does two things. One, because you're 1v2, it's going to be a very inefficient fight. The enemy's going to get a lot of value out of it because they outnumber you, and you don't ever want to fight when you're outgunned, outnumbered, because they're going to do a lot of damage and you're going to do basically nothing. And then they're going to get all the reclaim from your units after you die. So what you want to do is don't even try to fight this. Come back here. The gauntlet's up here, so just bring back, reform a line back here, and that'll allow you to take less damage, so you're still a force in the game that can provide value, rather than standing up here and losing value. Probably want to just reclaim a little bit if you can, but if you're going to lose constructors and a lot of commander health to get that reclaim, not worth it. Just back out. Now, one of the effects that backing out will have, it'll be a very clear signal to your allies that you're weak, and because you have communicated to everyone in the game, you're weak, I can't fight this, so I'm backing off. And that is a cue to them. It shows them they can help. One more thing it does, if your enemy has spent all these metal in these defenses, that's a significant amount of metal there that can't chase you. So suddenly that 1v2 becomes a little better. And if you didn't build so many defenses yourself, and all your investment is in mobile army, as I suggested, just 1 or 2 LLTs at the maximum. That's not much of an investment. You bring everything back here, then you've kept most of what you have alive, and an enemy that has invested a lot in defenses, that is 1800 metal that can't come chase you. If we look at how big your army is, about this point, it's about 1500 metal all up. A couple units are a little far from the front line. If we count a couple units of yours that have died, it's a little bit more. It's about that 1800. If we count Atlas Wolfgang's army, about 1470, he's invested a little bit more in army and a little less in defenses. We look at Better Do Better's army. Excuse me. He's invested 1385 in army. Generally, because he's had a better economy, you have a bunch of resources in your storage. So, what that tells me is the investment you have into army is about one of those players. But Atlas Wolfgang, if we look at the resources down here or up here, he's used all his metal. Better Do Better has also used all his metal. You've used half your metal. And you have half the army, half the mobile army as them two put together. So if you had adjusted your economy a little better, built this energy a little sooner, especially without building that energy storage, then that would put you in a situation where you fall back to here, and suddenly, because half their investment can't move, you're at that 1v2 is a fightable fight for you. And if they move forward and try to fight you where you're even, and these two players go, it's like, oh, I've got a nice juicy flank I can come across and help with, then suddenly they are 2v3 or better because they've spent a bunch of half their resources not moving. It's sort of like 1v however one of them against one of you with all your army against however much they send across, and that's all bonus damage anything your ally sends. And so that's a great way to get a huge amount of value out of that army. Also, because they've played defensive, if you move back and just secure these resources, that's generally, you want to be careful with this because they can keep building army and attack you, but that's often a really good time for you to go T2, where they won't be able to do much against you. And yeah, if you'd have just moved back faster, keep your commander, if in this sort of a situation, keep your commander up there so it can kill these pawns, it can degun and protect your other units that are retreating, and make sure they retreat. You could have kept most of them alive, and then you would be at a line back here again, and you would be in a pretty solid state, able to defend against what they send at you. You're still at an advantage, at a disadvantage, and a lot of that disadvantage is because, and actually this is a really good point. This is a demonstration of what I was saying earlier. You're still at a disadvantage because you've had to fall back because your ally has made a mistake and not supported you, and because you've made a mistake with your resources and not being able to support yourself. But even when you fall back, and you could have done this before you lost any units and you would still have a significant army, these guys come in. So that's a very good demonstration of exactly what I was saying earlier. Proactively fall back before, when you don't get, like, because you're not going to get help, or because it takes time for help to come, and you set your enemy up for the help to do the most damage to them. Because if this help came in and attacked up here where all the defenses were, the help would be shredded. But if they attack in this no man's land, which is where you used to be, and it's opened up because you moved back and they're chasing you to kill you, you've given your allies an opportunity to be helpful here. Alright. I guess these metal extractors have died. So, at this point in the game, I probably wouldn't chase those units over there. These are blitz, they are fast, and they're being chased by shurikens, they're in their lane. That's their problem. Especially because it didn't come from your lane. Much more value is to be found in this fight here, where if you move away, you make your allies less effective. It's not moving away from when your allies have come to help you. It's not just that your units aren't getting any value for them. Each unit you pull out of the fight makes every other unit in the fight less effective. Because they can't exploit teamwork. Because they can't fire at you, because you're not killing any enemy units, your allies' units are just gonna die faster and do less. But if you'd have kept fighting in this position when you did get help, you would have been in a position to pressure these guys back off this wreckage, and you would have had a chance to reclaim. It's gonna be really difficult, to be honest, because they have a gauntlet covering that entire area. But at the very least, you could open and secure these fringe areas that are right at the edge of the range for your benefit, and make it difficult and dangerous for the enemy to reclaim this area, which is within the gauntlet range. Okay. And over here, I would say, using your constructor to assist this T2 constructor, but just like earlier in the game, where you started expanding, and as you expanded, you ran out of energy because you didn't build enough energy in your base. In this sort of a situation, you've queued up your T2 metal extractors. Consider a couple things. One, your T2 metal extractors take 20 energy per second to build. So just to run your T2 metal extractors, you need an extra 2 wind generators per T2 metal extractors. You've queued up 4, you need 8 extra wind generators. That needs to be queued up immediately. They need to go up. I guess you could put them up after the metal extractors, but if you're continuing to build the metal extractors, you're going to need them as soon as possible. And they can be built, say, in the gap. While these are walking from place to place, you can allocate the resources to build those. The other thing is that not only that, you're going to need even more energy to use the extra 5.5 metal that this is going to use. Building Whistlers or T2 units that you might want to be building. Hey Killer. Building Whistlers or any other T2 unit you might want to be building, you're probably going to want 15 energy per metal. So again, you're looking at an extra 20. Did I get that right? No. That widget isn't working. Let's go to the browser. 1.5 times 15.
What are you talking to about?
I
Are you
am
practicing?
streaming plus making a recording for a replay review.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
Well,
Um,
you want to clip me saying that anybody who gets the masterclass from Master Bell is gonna do good. Hands down, an amazing player. So.
Thank you.
What was that tip you were saying about how many wins per medal or per T2?
So on this map, you're probably gonna want about 20 energy per second just to run the T2 max, and then you're going to want another 80 energy per second to use the metal that it produces. So that's 8 wind generators just to run the... No, sorry. That's 2 wind generators just to run the metal extractor, and 8 to run all of them. To run a single one, plus use the metal from it, you're going to want 10 wind generators per T2 max you put up on this map. On average.
The more you know.
Yeah.
I've been spamming glitters. And the best build orders I have are where I have like wind just being constantly used as I'm upgrading max.
Yeah, you need to make sure you're doing that when you're upgrading the maxes. Otherwise, something you might find is you'll often run out of metal to energy. Sorry, you run out of energy to upgrade the metal extractors. If we go like, how many metal extractors does this guy have? He's lost a couple, so he would have like 11. If we go just 10 metal extractors, that would be 200 energy. Take 30, so 100 and take 30 because each of the T1 metal extractors already take 3 metal a second, so that's 30 altogether. So that's 170 energy per second across all the metal extractors that he's going to be building. That's going to halve his effective energy income that he can use to use the metal he's building. But it's going to be a massive boost to his metal income. And so that's going to put him in a position where he's going to need a ton of extra wind generators, and he hasn't even started building them. He has just enough wind generators to use what he's already got, and Arar is... You're building energy storage when you don't even have enough energy for what you already have. And so it looks like in this situation, you're actually getting a bunch of sharing from your allies. This guy's using 400 energy per second more than he's producing, so you can run off that a little bit if you're aware of that. But that's not going to last forever, especially as people build like converters and use up all that excess. And I'd also encourage you to get solid in understanding how much resources you need to scale as you get to those T2 stages. And so make sure you've got those wind generators building.
Master Belt, would you say it's a good time to do or look to drop a fusion when you have that, like, T2 mexes covered with that basic energy supply? Like, I should be looking to be at least producing 300 to 350 E per second in order to have all my T2 on the front, all my T2 mexes on the front upgraded, correct? When I'm at that baseline, then I'm like, okay, if I need excess E for, like, let's say unit or other, I drop the fusion.
Yeah, well, I mean, if we go across the T2 maxes, let's say 10 T2 maxes, I think I worked out about 100 energy per second to just baseline use everything from those metal extractors, and that's assuming you're building something like Bulls or Starlight. Cost a little bit less energy to build, but they cost energy to fire, and so that's a consideration. That's 200 energy per second per Starlight to fire, approximately.
That's insane.
Yeah, I think it's actually a little bit more than that because they fire more than every 5 seconds. So yes, a fusion is going to be very desirable, and you're going to often run into a sort of situation where if you build too many metal extractors, you won't have the energy to build a fusion. But the requirement to build a... There's a couple things here. Like, if you need 1,000 energy in total, this guy has already... this guy has already half the energy income that he needs. Less than half the energy income he needs total. With the wind generators, solar collectors, and his constructors. It is at max wind, so that works the math a little bit. But you're kind of looking at, like, if you add a fusion onto this already, you're going to end up with more energy than you need. And it's not necessarily the most efficient way to get it. So we've got really wish this widget would work because it's so cool when it works. What about if I do that? Actually, that works. Nice. So if we say he has 22 wind generators, let's just do a math for the average. So that 22 wind generators is producing 352 energy, which means that 90 energy per second approximately is produced by other things. So let's just say we want 900 energy per second to be produced by wind generators. That is, on average, that's going to need about 81 wind generators, which is about 3,000 metal. So at average wind on this map, he can build the energy he needs cheaper than building a fusion. Actually, if I go all the way up there, even if it was all full 1000, it would be more efficient for him to build the wind generators than the fusion. There's a benefit to building the fusion in that overall it's less build power. So if you're building wind generators, that would be 1,600 build cost, so that's a total of 145,000 worker time, build time to build it, while for a fusion you're looking at half that. So you need half the builders or half the time to build the fusion reactor, which can be a huge benefit. But that comes with the added cost of you don't get any energy until that's built, while as you ramp up these wind generators along the way, you get that production. So I'd probably suggest that players rely more on building wind generators for that energy production, and if you absolutely need to, solar collectors or advanced solars, rather than going for straight into that fusion. I'm not sure if that's 100% secure. I'm not actually the best at... I really struggle often with managing my energy and making those smooth transitions into T2 and upgrading the economy. And probably other mentors like Zao or Happiness would probably be a lot stronger at that thing. But that's probably the kind of numbers you gotta keep in mind. It makes sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Wow.
Yeah. Also, someone in Twitch
if you
chat...
were, like,
Hmm?
you could just, like, eventually you can get down to, like, figuring out, like, how many, like, wins you need to drop, like, per second or per minute in order to sustain, like, a certain...
Yeah. If you wanna iron that out, you can get into, like, because you could say it's like if you need 10 wind generators per T2 max, that would be 16,000 build time. You could say you need the same amount of build power building wind generators as T2 maxes approximately, and you'd have enough wind.
The more you know. Holy. Well, I'm gonna go use this actually. Thank you, Master Bell.
You're very welcome, Killer.
Have fun.
You too.
Insane. I'm actually gonna wreck.
Alright. Yeah, 60 in chat suggested that, what I was saying earlier about the reclaim you had here, that's the circle for it already, that was in the range of this. You can also, to a certain extent, move your commander up and just dig on the Rex so that he can't do it. And so if you could have pushed the enemy back off that a little bit, that could have been extremely valuable and denied a huge amount of resources to the enemy. Something else I'd strongly suggest, once you're at the Tech 2 stage, and especially once your allies have Tech 2 units, I generally stop building Tech 1 units. They're just weaker than Tech 2 units. Something to consider is that even though your Stout, for example, costs a relatively low amount of energy per the metal cost, your defenses like your Beamer and your laser tower cost even less energy per metal you spend. Your Dragon's Claw is an extremely low energy cost. And so at a time where you're upgrading your metal extractors and you're going to be as tight on energy as really tight on energy, you're probably going to be wanting to build those defenses rather than mobile units, especially because the defenses are also more cost efficient than your mobile units, and you're not really going to have the quantity of mobile units to move forward and attack because you're building metal extractors, and that's taking away from your frontline force. For complicated reasons, which I would probably get into in a more high level review, if you're building economy and like scaling your economy, you're not in a great position to attack and move forward. Sometimes you will be, but generally you won't be. And so unless you're focusing 100% on moving forward on the front line and sustaining that, generally what I'd advise to lower skill players is like you defend and eco at the same time, or you 100% into units and push and no resources into eco. And so an extreme version of that, for example, is what I do, where I sit on 3 metal extractors on sometimes even a map like Glitters. 3 metal extractors, I build exactly the number of wind generators I need, and a factory, and then I just sit there building grunts or pawns and ticks. And then I use that to get a large number of units, and I end up with more units often than anyone who's investing into economy and expanding. And then I can use that to do a huge amount of damage and get a huge amount of value out of those units. Where if I'd have built only a few units and scaled economy, any of the units I would build, at best they can keep enemy units from attacking my economy, but they aren't even great at doing that because there are so few of them. So yeah, in a situation like this, where your allies are ecoing and frontline is relatively stable and you're trying to upgrade your mexes, it's a much better time for you to be building static defenses rather than moving forward and pushing at the enemy line. And that's kind of what you can see here that Atlas Wolfgang is doing. Actually, most of the other players aren't doing anything except expanding. Better Do Better is building sprinters, but these constructors are all basically on low priority. So we can see, even though he's got a bunch of constructors on this, he's using like a tiny fraction, like 5% of his resources is going into building this army, and basically everything else like is going into building these metal extractors. Where is the rest going actually? Because that's not all of it. Maybe it is all of it actually. Yeah. And likewise, if you're building this economic structures and investing into that, I wouldn't build this advanced vehicle plant. This base build power needs to be building energy production to be able to use the metal from the metal extractors. You want to be probably building additional construction turrets. Construction turret takes 8 seconds to build a wind turbine. 8, that's 5 metal a second. You probably want to be adding on 1 more construction turret per T2 mex you build, while you're scaling wind generators and construction turrets. And at least on this map, these numbers change on every map, I would say, depending on the wind speed available, depending on how much metal the metal extractors produce. It's all variable. But yeah, one construction turret per T2 mex. You want to be adding, not exactly, because your T2 constructor here, that would count as approximately 1 construction turret. These 2 constructors here, together they constitute a little less than 1 construction turret. The T2 constructor is also a little less than 1 construction turret, especially because it like moves around. But that's kind of the number you want to be sitting about. And then with all this wreckage up here, maybe an even higher priority is to get some constructors out, And because this is going to give you a reward much faster than upgrading your metal, but you'll still need to upgrade your energy, get some constructors up here and build, reclaim all these wreckages and establish some laser towers so that you can keep those constructors alive while they're reclaiming. And maybe even put out some Tech 1 units. It's iffy, but the enemy isn't actively building army, so even though they're a little less efficient, they'll be alright. I'd prefer just your allies who have T2 economy and can support. It would be better if this guy was working to secure this metal rack up here. There's 6,000 metal on the field there, approximately. So it would be better if he was working to secure that rather than working to build a fusion. But yeah, this is going to be 3,000 metal. That isn't going to help you in a timely fashion, isn't going to help you secure this. It's going to give the enemy plenty of time to reclaim it. It isn't going to help you build the wind generators you need to use the metal production you're getting, and it isn't going to help you upgrade the metal extractors and get the economy. So it's just a drain on you right now. What I would do is, after you have upgraded most of your metal extractors, then I would start building that, and after you have most of the energy production that you need. Also, I see a lot of people focusing on the commander rack because, wow, that's 1,250 metal. And that is impressive. But what else is 1,250 metal? Well, that's 1,302 metal. This metal here that I just highlighted is higher priority than that comrack. Make it a bit bigger, there's 2,000 metal there. This stuff over here is higher priority than this one thing. Now this is, because it's concentrated, it's really easy to reclaim, but it's that kind of thing you've got to pay attention to. There is a lot of reclaim out here on the field that you need to consider beyond just the commander rack. Telling him to push here, I don't think is a wise decision. Given that you aren't actively building units, he isn't actively building units, and the enemy has this established defense that you already know about, pushing isn't a great option here. You could move around and help this push over here, but that leaves you extremely vulnerable over here because you have some amount of vision. More vision would be better because this is just outside of vision. I'd like to have you get a radar further up here as a high priority. But generally speaking, if you're going to choose what to do in this situation, playing defensive is a much better option while you scale your economy. Unless, again, you're going to go full into resources, which you have actually put out a bull, so that's reasonable. But you're gonna want to, because the other thing is, like, if you are in a situation where this guy's pushing through here effectively, a great option again is to pork across here, and that frees your army to come up there and help. But mostly I'd focus on just here. You still don't have enough energy production. You're still getting excess from your team, but that's going away as these guys are starting to build more and more energy converters. And so scaling your energy, holding while you're doing that scaling and not worrying about pushing. And then when you have that economy established, then you can start thinking about, is there anywhere that's weak that I could push? I think overall, technically in that situation, this kind of situation, it would be better for your entire team to just focus all on units and push through that gap there. Because it's a very vulnerable place and the enemy isn't doing much to defend it. But for the moment, I want to focus you on scaling your economy and managing that as a first priority, and so just do that for now. with the coordinate with your team and attack the weak points as a stretch goal. Right. I'm not sure. Let me check how much longer there is to this game. 34 minutes. So we're only about halfway through, actually. But I'm not sure there's a lot more to get from this. I also entirely forgot that about the other review. I was going to read that, at least skim it and refer to it, but I completely forgot about that, so I'm sorry about that. If I've repeated anything that's said in there, good work to the other mentor, or no, it wasn't a mentor, but good work to the guy who volunteered. But I haven't actually been able to check that, sorry. This here is a good example of how you've an opportunity where it would have been much better for you to attack through the weak point up here. They just have heavy artillery defenses, so the fact that you've fallen back and you're not pushing through there is a good thing, but I would couple that with, because you're not going to push there and these armies are just sitting there, when you've got something sitting still, you generally want that to just be a static unit, like pit bulls or a rattlesnake or something like that. So go for those units and that option to defend this front, and then if you're going to build mobile units, build them with the intention of pushing through the gap where they can effectively move forward. And there are definitely cases where mobile units are better for being defensive, but generally I want to get you in the spirit of build the static defenses when you're defending a place and you're not going to be moving there, and then use your mobile units to just go around and find a weak point on the map and build them with a specific weak point in mind. For example, over here, it's the kind of weak point where they've got a lot of blitz and artillery units and something. I would be building Jaguar if you wanted to go through this. Over here, you have a lot of slow, heavy defenses. This is, I still think, is a weak point, but it has to be a weak point to the right units. Over here, you want Starlights and Artillery, because these are slow units and ranged units. And they're going to deal a lot of damage to your Jaguars, and they aren't going to be so effective, but your Starlights and Artillery will just chew through this really effectively. And of course, because these units and the fast units can come over in here and help out, you will want some Jaguars as well, but yeah. That's what I want to focus you on in this sort of a situation. Here with the eco scaling, this is fine. Again, I wouldn't be doing the eco scaling at the same time as the building units. Focus on one or the other. That for example allows you, if you're going to focus on eco scaling, that allows you to reclaim your factory and put all that resources into your fusion, get them done faster and paid off, and then you can rebuild your factory, etc. So that's really my only complaint there. I think overall it would be better for, again, just come through and help on this front here. But as you're focusing on yourself, which is the first priority for now, make sure you're not doing this and this and this at the same time. I think that's all I'm gonna have to say about this one, because the focus of this one is mostly on the eco, making sure you're balancing your eco, and making sure you're focusing on the one thing at a time. So I'm going to leave this replay here, even though it's not done. And I'm going to get you to focus on that for the future.